I thought it was time for an update on the NASDAQ, given that, of course, it spent much of 2022 in decline. And then from about October of last year, we did see this market, this tech index, build a base. And since then, we've had a recovery. We've had a breakout through the downtrend line, but it has struggled during February. So I thought, let's do an update. Let's take a look at it, have a quick look at it and see, is this an opportunity to buy the dip in the NASDAQ, or is it actually going to head back to those old lows from late in 2021? I'm David Jones. As usual in this video, I'll go through some of the recent news, what's driving the market, particularly why have we seen it under pressure through much of February. Then we'll jump onto the charts, take a look at the charts in a bit more detail. I do have a trade running on the NASDAQ at the moment, so I'll talk a little bit about that. Before we get into it, just a quick mention of a newsletter that I launched a few weeks ago. It's all completely free of charge. If you go to my website, jonesthemarkets.com, and scroll to the bottom, you can sign up for the newsletter from there. It comes out on a Saturday. It's a recap of what was the major stuff going on in markets over the previous 5 days. A look ahead to what to watch in the week ahead, what hot market I'm going to be watching in the week ahead. And also a trading tip in there as well. And on my website, you can also see details of the trading course I run that I've been running for almost a couple of years now. So if you go to the website, jonesthemarkets.com, you can sign up for the newsletter and all of that. Right, let's get into it and take a look at this NASDAQ in a bit more detail. So we did see the tech-biased US stock market index, the NASDAQ 100, peak in November 2021. And it started a slide that has ended so far in October 2022. But over that period, the market dropped by about 35%. So it was a sizable slide in about 11 months or so. So since then, we had that base that got built. We've seen a recovery in recent months for the NASDAQ. But during February, almost for all of February, it's a market that has been under pressure. And we've seen this across a lot of stock markets. You know, once again, markets, investors, traders, all still very much fixated on inflation. You know, the rising cost of living that most of us have experienced over the last year, perhaps a bit longer, with everything getting more expensive. We have seen the inflation numbers start to drop off. In recent months, we've seen a steady fall in US inflation data, but clearly everything is still more expensive than it was a year ago. Last week, we had the minutes from the latest Federal Reserve meeting, and the minutes from these meetings are often just as important as the decision itself. And the minutes definitely showed a willingness by the US Central Bank, the Federal Reserve, to continue to persist with interest rate rises until inflation showed definite signs of, you know, being on a slide back towards the target of around 2%. And I think perhaps that some in markets, some investors saw that as disappointing, that we wouldn't see rates starting to be cut perhaps as soon as was expected towards the end of the year, maybe. But let's see, this can all change very quickly as the data changes. But you know, the prospect of further rate rises and higher rates staying around for longer has not been well received by stock markets over the last few weeks. So we have seen pressure on plenty of markets. The S&P is another one, the broader US stock market index, but the NASDAQ's the one we're looking at today. We've seen it drop back, you know, a decent amount during February from the very early February highs. The question is, as ever, I think whenever we look at a market that's moving like this, is this the start of a much deeper sell-off, or actually is this a buying opportunity? We've had a market that's been in recovery for the last few months. It did spend most of 2022 sliding, but is this little bit of weakness in Feb just a buying opportunity? Let's take a look. I know what I think, but let's have a look on the charts and talk through the important zones to watch and where I think it might go next. So let's take a look at this NASDAQ. So first of all, the big picture, going back to the all-time highs hit in November 2021, up around 16,770. Then we saw the market in decline for much of 2022. We did see it build this base though from October through to January of this year. And then we had the break out of the downtrend line. As I often say in the live streams, I'm a bit suspicious of breaks, initial breaks. But we then had some follow through. We saw the NASDAQ trade up through these old highs from November and December of last year. So we saw some real strength in this market. And then if I zoom in, the story for much of February, it did push to this recovery high on the 2nd of Feb, up at 12,900. But it's been selling off since then. It's lost about 1,000 points from the peak on the 2nd of Feb to the low so far at the end of last week, last Friday. So the question for me is, well, where's it going to go next? So for now, at least, we do still have higher highs and higher lows, just about, for the NASDAQ. I'm looking at the RSI. This is a 10-day RSI. It's not oversold. The last time this was oversold was at the end of December last year. And we saw the NASDAQ trade down to about 10,700. The RSI went oversold. We're not there yet, but clearly it has come off from its overbought extreme. So in the really short term, the level I'm going to be watching this week, it's probably a zone. Let's call it a zone rather than a level. I think the most immediate support is here, and it's that low from the end of January, around 11,800. At the time of recording this, we have seen a recovery for the NASDAQ. It's trading at 12,085 at the moment. So it's, what's that? It's a couple of hundred points above that level, 250, 260 points above that level. But I think that's the first one to watch. It was a low, an important low on the way up at the end of January, and the sort of the springboard out to this fresh recovery high. And then these lows, this sort of spiky low, the 25th of January, around 11,545. So let's say 11,550 to 11,800, I think, is an important area to watch. Like I said, I'm long the NASDAQ at the moment. I've bought into the dip. I bought too early into the dip. I ended in buying around 12.4. I've got a relatively wide stop on the trade because I want to see if it can really get a move on from here. And if it reverses much from here, I think the risk is perhaps we'll go back for a retest of this 10,800 area. Let's see how it works out. But I think this was an important break and subsequent strength for me in the NASDAQ. If we take a look at things on the shorter term chart. So I've flipped this over to a 4-hour candlestick chart now. So each candle represents 4 hours worth of trading. And you can see so far at least, the market on Friday did trade down towards this old support. And it has held so far. But let's not get too overexcited. You know, it's only been not even a day so far that we've seen it bounce away from this support. But let's see what happens. And like I say, this is the other big level for me, down at 11,545. So still mildly positive for me. But if we start losing those support levels, I think the risk is we could see people throw the towel in the short term at least, and a retest of these levels, the lows really that we saw at the beginning of the year. But if this recovery is going to persist, let's take a look at some targets. So if the NASDAQ is going to extend the recovery, then a logical target for me, just looking at previous major highs, would be the highs from the summer last year. Back in August of 2022, the NASDAQ got as high as 13.7 up here. So perhaps, again, if we look at it as a zone, the zone from the high later in August, 13.2 to 13.7 would be the next target for me. So it's an interesting trade down here in terms of risk versus reward. It does all hinge, for now at least, in the short term, on that old support zone holding. But I think it's a really interesting market to watch. Like I say, for me, I'm long at the moment. I've got to stop on the trade. We'll see how it works out, but one to watch in the days ahead to see if we do get further strength away from that level of support. That's it for the update on the NASDAQ 100. Never a dull moment in this market. I'm happy with my trade so far. Let's see if that support zone continues to hold. Don't forget, go to the website, jonesandmarkets.com, to sign up for the newsletter and get that every Saturday is normally when I send it out, all free of charge. But for now, we'll leave things there. So until the next time, good luck with your trading.